The sun had not yet climbed above the eastern hills when the first shouts shattered the quiet morning. Elara, a young Lakota woman, stirred from her sleep, her heart pounding before she even knew why. The village had been peaceful only moments before, wrapped in the soft gray light of dawn. Children slept bundled in buffalo robes, women prepared the morning meal, and the few remaining warriors spoke in low voices near the central fire. Elara had known sorrow already in her young life. Her husband, Tall Bear, had been killed the winter before when a hunting trip turned deadly. A sudden storm, a misplaced step on the icy rocks, and he was gone. Now she lived with her husband's family, helping where she could, her heart still heavy with grief. The shouts grew louder. Then came the thunder of hooves. Elara rushed from her lodge just as the first gunshots cracked through the air. Men on horseback, white settlers, their faces twisted with anger, charged through the village, firing rifles into the air, into lodges, into anyone who moved. Smoke already curled from the edges of the closest homes, flames licking at the dry hides. Chaos erupted. Warriors grabbed weapons, but the attackers were too many, too fast. Elara saw Little Fox, a boy of only 10 summers, cut down as he ran for the river. She saw Gray Dove, an elder who had taught her to weave baskets, fall beneath a horse's trampling hooves. The air filled with screams, with gunpowder, with the terrible laughter of the raiders. Elara did not think. She grabbed a knife from the ground and lunged at the nearest rider, slashing at his leg. The man howled in pain, but another struck her from behind. A searing pain exploded in her side. She collapsed, gasping, her vision swimming. The settlers did not finish her. One of them, a bearded man with cold eyes, looked down at her bleeding form and smirked. "Let the wolves have her," he said. Then they rode away, taking with them the stolen children, the stolen horses, leaving behind only death and fire. Elara lay in the dirt, her breath shallow, her side burning. Around her, the village was silent except for the crackle of flames and the moans of the dying. She tried to move, but the pain was too great. She dragged herself inch by inch toward the edge of the village, leaving a dark trail in the dust. The sun rose higher, cruel and bright. Elara's vision blurred. She did not know if she was crawling toward help or toward her end. She only knew she could not stay. Somewhere in the haze of pain, she whispered a prayer not for herself, but for the spirits of those she had lost. Then the world went dark. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of purple and orange as night crept across the plains. A lone figure moved silently through the tall grass, his horse stepping carefully over the uneven ground. This was Tohan, a young Cheyenne warrior who had been traveling for many days, far from his own people. He was a man who walked between worlds, belonging to no village but knowing many lands. As he rode, a faint smell reached him on the evening breeze. Smoke. Not the clean smoke of a cooking fire, but the thick, choking smoke of destruction. Tohan straightened in his saddle, his dark eyes narrowing as he looked toward the horizon. There, against the darkening sky, a dull glow pulsed where no fire should be. Without a word, he turned his horse and rode toward it. The closer he got, the heavier the air became. The scent of burned hides and something worse, something metallic and terrible, filled his nose. When he reached what remained of the Lakota village, his stomach twisted. Lodges stood as blackened skeletons, their poles jutting up like broken bones. The ground was littered with belongings scattered in haste: a child's doll, a shattered pot, a single moccasin left behind. Tohan dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his knife. He knew what had happened here. He had seen it before. The white settlers had come, and they had left only death behind. His jaw tightened as he walked through the ruins, listening for any sound of life. Then he heard a faint, ragged breath. Near the edge of the village, half hidden by a fallen buffalo robe, lay a young woman. Her face was streaked with dirt and ash, her lips cracked with thirst. A dark stain spread across her side where a bullet had torn into her. She was alive, but barely. Tohan knelt beside her. He did not know her, and their tribes were not the same. Some men might have ridden on, thinking this was not their fight. But Tohan was not such a man. Gently, he lifted her into his arms. She stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering, but she did not wake. He carried her to his horse and settled her carefully in front of him, supporting her limp body as they began the long ride to his camp. The journey took hours. The woman's breathing was shallow, and more than once, Tohan feared she would not survive the trip. But at last, they reached his hidden shelter, a small clearing near a stream, where the trees grew thick enough to hide the glow of a fire. For days, he worked to save her. He cleaned her wound with water from the stream, packed it with a paste made from crushed leaves, and wrapped it tightly with strips of clean hide. He trickled water between her lips when she was too weak to drink. He kept the fire burning low through the cold nights, watching as her chest rose and fell with each struggling breath. On the third night, her eyes opened. She gasped, her hands clutching at the robes beneath her, her eyes wild with fear. Tohan moved slowly, keeping his voice low. "You are safe," he said in the Lakota tongue, though his words were halting. "No one will hurt you here." The woman Elara stared at him, her breath coming fast. She did not know this man. He was Cheyenne, not of her people. Was he friend or enemy? Her body screamed at her to run, but the pain in her side was too great. She had no strength left to fight. Tohan saw the fear in her eyes. He did not reach for her. Instead, he placed a bowl of broth near her hands and stepped back. "Eat," he said simply. Then he turned and walked to the other side of the fire, giving her space. Elara watched him warily. She did not trust him, but the smell of the broth made her stomach clench with hunger. After a long moment, she reached for it. And so, in silence, their strange new life together began. Days passed in quiet rhythm at Tohan's hidden camp. Elara's body was still weak, her wound healing slowly beneath the careful dressings of herbs and clean hides. Each morning, she woke to the sound of birds in the trees and the soft crackle of the fire as Tohan prepared food. She watched him from beneath half-closed eyelids, studying his movements, waiting for the moment he might reveal his true intentions. But Tohan never gave her reason to fear him. He hunted in the early hours, returning with rabbits or fish, which he cooked and shared without hesitation. He gathered roots and berries, showing Elara which ones were safe to eat. When she struggled to sit up, he brought her water without being asked. He spoke little, but his actions were steady and kind. At first, Elara refused to let her guard down. She had seen too much cruelty to trust easily. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to notice the small things, the way Tohan always made sure she had the warmest place by the fire, how he never took the best portion of meat for himself, how he treated the land and animals with respect. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Tohan sat across from her, sharpening his knife. Elara, feeling stronger, finally broke the silence. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tohan paused, his hands stilling. He looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable in the firelight. Then he set the knife aside. "Because no one should be left to die alone," he said. Elara frowned. "But I am not of your people. We are strangers." Tohan nodded. "Yes. But I know what it is to lose everything." He picked up a stick and poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the night. "Many winters ago, my village was attacked. I was young, away hunting when it happened. By the time I returned..." His voice trailed off, and Elara saw the shadow of old pain cross his face. There was no one left. Elara's breath caught. She understood that kind of loss. She had lived it herself. Tohan continued. "I wandered for a long time after that. Alone. I thought I would always be alone." He looked at her then, his gaze steady. "When I found you, I could not walk away." The fire crackled between them, the only sound in the quiet night. Elara felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of warmth where before there had only been cold grief. For the first time since her village was destroyed, she did not feel entirely alone. Tohan stood, stretching. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow, if you are strong enough, I will show you how to make the healing paste for your wound." Elara nodded, watching as he moved to his own sleeping place. She lay back, staring up at the stars through the branches overhead. The world was still broken, still cruel. But here, in this small camp with this quiet warrior, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. The morning air carried a new urgency when Tohan woke Elara before dawn. He moved quietly but with purpose, gathering their few belongings and tightening the straps on his horse's saddle. Elara rubbed sleep from her eyes, watching as he scanned the tree line with wary eyes. "We cannot stay here much longer," he said, his voice low. "The settlers will return to these lands, and when they do, they will search for survivors." He handed Elara a water skin and a small pouch of dried meat. "We must go north, beyond the great river, where their hunger for land has not yet reached." Elara nodded. Though her wound still ached, she knew he was right. The memory of smoke and gunfire was too fresh, too raw. She would not wait for death to find her again. They rode as the sun rose, Tohan leading the way through thick stands of trees and across open meadows where the grass swayed like waves in the wind. Elara sat behind him, her arms wrapped lightly around his waist to steady herself. The land stretched endlessly before them, beautiful and wild and full of hidden dangers. As they traveled, Tohan began teaching Elara the secrets of the wilderness. He showed her how to read the subtle signs left by animals, the broken twigs that marked a deer's passing, the shallow scratches on bark where a bear had sharpened its claws. He taught her which plants could heal and which could kill, crushing leaves between his fingers so she could learn their scents. Elara listened carefully, determined to prove she was more than a burden. When they stopped to rest near a clear stream, she pointed to tracks in the mud. "A fox passed here," she said, "and not long ago." Tohan smiled just slightly. "Good eyes." It was the first real praise he had given her, and it warmed her more than the noonday sun. The days blurred together as they moved steadily northward. They crossed rivers where the water ran swift and cold, Tohan's horse swimming strongly as Elara clung to its mane. They slept in hollows beneath rocky overhangs when rain fell in heavy sheets, sharing body heat beneath damp hides. Hunger was a constant companion, but between Tohan's skill with a bow and Elara's growing knowledge of edible roots and berries, they never starved. One evening, as fireflies danced at the edge of their small camp, Elara found herself speaking of her life before the attack. She told Tohan of her husband, Tall Bear, and how he could mimic bird calls so perfectly even the birds answered him. She spoke of her little sister, who had loved to braid wildflowers into Elara's hair. The words came easier than she expected, as if sharing the memories lightened their weight. Tohan listened in silence, then surprised her by sharing his own stories. He spoke of his people's belief that the stars were ancestors watching over them, and of the trickster coyote, whose mischief taught hard but important lessons. His voice was deeper when he spoke of his younger sister, who had been learning to tan hides when their village was destroyed. A log collapsed in the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. In that moment, Elara realized something had changed between them. They were no longer just a wounded woman and the warrior who saved her. They were becoming something else, two survivors bound by shared sorrow, yes, but also by something softer. Something like trust. Tohan stretched, the firelight painting his face in gold and shadow. "Tomorrow we cross the high ridge," he said. "Beyond it the land is good. We could stay there a while." Elara nodded, pulling her hide blanket tighter around her shoulders. For the first time since her world ended, the future did not seem like a dark and empty thing. Wherever this journey led, at least she would not walk the path alone. The morning mist still clung to the ground when they crested the final hill and looked down into the valley below. Elara caught her breath as she took in the sight before her. A small, clear river wound through the grassy basin like a silver thread, its banks dotted with wildflowers. Towering pines stood guard along the slopes, their branches whispering in the breeze. Near the river's edge stood a simple lodge, its frame sturdy, but in need of repair. "This is yours?" Elara asked, her voice hushed with wonder. Tohan nodded. "I built it 2 winters past, when I needed a place to stay through the cold moons." He guided his horse down the slope, then turned to help Elara dismount. "You are welcome to stay here," he said, his dark eyes serious. "The land is good, and the settlers do not know this place. But if you wish to go your own way—" He let the words hang in the air between them. Elara didn't need time to decide. She looked around at the peaceful valley, at the fish jumping in the river, at the sturdy lodge that could become a true home. For the first time since the attack, she felt something like safety wrapping around her. "I will stay," she said simply. The work began that very day. Together they repaired the lodge, replacing worn hides with fresh ones Elara stitched tight against the wind. Tohan showed her how to set fish traps in the river shallows, while she taught him to weave baskets from reeds, her fingers moving with remembered skill. At night they sat by their fire, the lodge growing more comfortable with each passing day. As the moon waxed and waned, they fell into an easy rhythm. Elara discovered she had a talent for tanning hides, making them soft as clouds. Tohan, in turn, taught her to shape bows from the strong hickory that grew along the valley's edge. Their hands often brushed as they worked, neither pulling away as they once might have. One evening, as they shared a meal of trout and wild onions, Tohan surprised her by producing a small carving from his pouch. It was a bird in flight, its wings spread wide, made from smooth maple wood. "For you," he said, placing it in her palm. "To remember that not all things that fall stay broken." Elara turned the carving over in her hands, her throat tight. That night, as she lay listening to the river song, she realized something important. This quiet valley, this shared work, this growing understanding between them, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was the beginning of something new, something strong and beautiful, as the land around them. Outside, an owl called from the pines. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf answered. Elara closed her eyes, smiling as she imagined tomorrow's work, tomorrow's shared meals, tomorrow's quiet moments with the warrior who had become far more than her rescuer. The past still hurt, but here, in this hidden valley, the future stretched before her like an unwritten story. The evening air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke as Elara stirred the cooking pot over their fire. The rich aroma of venison stew mingled with the earthy smell of wild herbs she had gathered that afternoon. Across the flames, Tohan sat carving a new arrow shaft, his strong hands moving with careful precision. This quiet rhythm of their evenings had become as familiar to Elara as her own heartbeat. As the first stars blinked to life in the darkening sky, Tohan set aside his work. He watched Elara for a long moment, the firelight painting golden patterns across her face. She had grown stronger since coming to the valley, not just in body, but in spirit. The shadows that once haunted her eyes had softened, replaced by a quiet determination that showed in everything she did. "Elara," he said, his voice deeper than usual. She looked up, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. Tohan reached into the pouch at his belt and drew out 2 small bundles wrapped in soft doeskin. He placed one before her on the smooth log they used as a bench. "Open it," he said. Her fingers trembled slightly as she untied the leather cord. Inside lay a necklace simple but beautifully made. A leather cord held a polished stone arrowhead, its edges smoothed by countless hours of careful work. Beside it lay a matching piece, this one with a hole carefully drilled through its base. "My grandmother's people had a tradition," Tohan said quietly. When a warrior found the woman he wished to walk life's path with, he would make matching arrowheads. One for her, one for him, to show their lives would fly together in the same direction. He took a slow breath. "I do not want to be alone anymore, Elara. And I do not want you to be alone either." The fire crackled between them as Elara stared at the gift in her hands. Memories flashed through her mind, the terror of her village's destruction, the long days of pain and healing, the quiet moments of laughter as they built their life in this valley. She thought of how Tohan had never once treated her as less than equal, how he had saved her life only to give her the freedom to choose her own path. Tohan watched her face, his dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "You do not have to answer now if dash." "Yes," Elara interrupted, her voice clear and strong. She reached across the fire to take his hand. Yes, I will be your wife. Not as a captive, not as a burden, but as your equal in all things. Something deep in Tohan's chest loosened, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying since that day he found her bleeding in the ruined village. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet, and placed the necklace around her throat. Elara did the same for him, her fingers brushing the warm skin at the back of his neck. Together they walked to the center of their small clearing, where the stars shone brightest overhead. There, beneath the watchful eyes of ancestors and the endless sky, they made their promises to stand together in hardship and plenty, to honor each other's strength, to build something lasting from the ashes of their past. That night, as they lay together beneath the same buffalo robe for the first time, Elara realized the most surprising thing of all. The love growing between them wasn't a sudden flame, but something that had been there all along, in shared meals and quiet conversations, in patient teaching and hard-won trust. It had been growing as steadily as the crops in their garden, as strong as the lodge walls they'd built together. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled its lonely song. But in their valley, in their lodge, two hearts that had known too much loneliness finally found their way home to each other. The years flowed like the river through their valley, each season bringing its own rhythm to their lives. The small lodge grew larger as Tohan and Elara added new rooms, its walls sturdy against the winter winds. Gardens flourished where Elara planted seeds saved from each harvest, their colors bright against the earth. The fish traps never came up empty, and the deer remained plentiful in the surrounding woods. Their first child came with the spring rains, a daughter with her father's strong features and her mother's thoughtful eyes. They named her a pony, meaning butterfly, for the way she seemed to bring new life wherever she went. 2 winters later, a son joined their family, his laughter ringing through the valley. They called him Chaska, firstborn son, though he was their second child. Each evening, as the fire burned low, Elara and Tohan taught their children the old stories. A pony learned to weave baskets just as her mother had, her small fingers nimble with the reeds. Chaska practiced with child-sized bows his father carved for him, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to mimic Tohan's steady aim. The children grew up speaking both Lakota and Cheyenne, their voices weaving the 2 languages together as naturally as the river blended with the land. Beyond their valley, the world changed in ways that sometimes reached even their hidden home. More settlers came, their wagons carving roads where buffalo once roamed. News came from travelers, other survivors, traders, messengers of lands taken and treaties broken. But in their valley, time moved differently. Here, the old ways still thrived. Here they were safe. Some nights, when the wind carried the scent of distant fires, Elara would stand at the edge of their clearing and remember. The memories no longer brought pain, only a quiet understanding of how far she had come. She would watch Tohan teaching their son to track, or see a pony carefully stitching beads onto a new dress, and feel a warmth settle deep in her chest. On the morning of their 10th summer together, Tohan found Elara by the river, her hands busy with a new basket. Without a word, he sat beside her and placed a small carving in her palm, a wolf and a butterfly, their shapes intertwined. "For us," he said simply. Elara turned the carving over in her hands, then reached for the necklace. She always wore the arrowhead he had given her years before. Both gifts, years apart, told the same story. She smiled and leaned into his shoulder, watching as their children splashed in the shallows downstream. The world beyond their valley might have been uncertain, but this, their love, their family, the life they had built together would endure. For as long as the river flowed and the stars shone above them, their story would continue. The end.